The Prime Minister, well, we know, did it yesterday, condemned what he called a deeply shocking anti-Semitic arson attack in North London.
4 ambulances belonging to a Jewish community charity in Golders Green were set alight, and loud explosions were heard as gas cylinders, oxygen tanks inside the ambulances, ignited.
Well, the Metropolitan Police have announced they are now ramping up protections for the Jewish community, and they'll see additional highly visible firearms patrols, an additional 264 officers alongside neighbouring officers to deploy vulnerable locations.
Operation Savata deployments, uniformed and plain clothes across key sites and high footfall areas, and use of drones.
Well, let's talk to the co-founder of GPS Network and Victims of Anti-Semitism, Jeremy Wootliff, and development manager at Christians United for Israel, UK, Alastair Kirk. Good to see you both this morning. Jeremy, can I start with you in all of this? I know you experienced this attack. I mean, you were able to hear it from where you live the other night, yesterday morning. Where does this leave us in the country when everyone's condemning it politically, but the Home Secretary is admitting anti-Semitism is on the rise?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us on the show. And obviously, the Jewish community is not happy with the situation. And we have seen it coming for a very long time. But we are where we are, and measures need to be taken. Now, we have heard all the right words from all the right people for oh so long. Now, as many in the community are saying, we want to see outcomes. So we're looking at new cohesion reports, new investigations, and we're looking at that coming back in the autumn, and we're looking then to see what's going to happen from there on. I'm sorry, how many people are going to be attacked between now and then? This is a situation that isn't just about terrorism. It's about the atmosphere of hating Jews being rife across the whole of the UK.
Alastair, as the Home Secretary was saying yesterday, the oldest hatred is rising again. And as Jeremy was just pointing out, all the right words are being said, and we're hearing more about additional funding. But how do we actually tackle the deep-rooted issue that is the oldest hatred?
Well, absolutely. I mean, a nation that cannot or will not protect its Jews is heading down a very dangerous path. And you're absolutely right, it's not just about words. Action is needed to be taken, and I think there are things we do need to get, to the root of the problem. We have allowed in this nation an environment of toxicity towards the Jewish people and towards Israel. Jews have been demonized, scapegoated, libeled. It is an ancient, anti-Semitism is an age-old problem, but it mutates, it evolves, and we have to look at anti-Semitism, I believe, in the present climate. If you cannot define anti-Semitism, how are you able to actually tackle it?
What's your role as a Christian for Israel? I wonder how that ties in. Because I was slightly intrigued by the fact that you said hatred for Israel. Now, I'm not in any way saying that that's justified, but in terms of dislike for countries, for governments and all the rest of it, people are entitled to disagree. And what concerns me about all of this is people seem to be saying, if you are Jewish or supporting Jewish people, then you are somehow linked with the Israeli government, which of course is clearly nonsense.
Well, yes, of course, people are entitled to their views regarding the state of Israel. But so often we see, and especially in my work, we see actually attitudes towards Israel as a cloak for anti-Semitism. They use all the buzzwords anti-Zionism, but what we see on the streets in these protests, what we see at university campuses, when we hear chants of, from the river to the sea, when we hear of intifada, calls for intifada, they're calling for the wiping out of the Jewish people. So we have to call it out for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, has the government failed to protect Jewish communities in the sense that we have seen these protests for the last 2.5 years, where we're hearing chants of globalise the intifada, where we're seeing hateful words on placards? Has that directly or indirectly led to what we saw yesterday in Golders Green?
I think, excuse me, it's part of the picture. The government I think, is on board, but it does it in its own way. And the consequences so far clearly are not good enough. British people who happen to be Jewish are 8 times more likely to be attacked on racial, ethnic, religious grounds than the next demographic. Jews are only 1 in 26 allegations of anti-Jewish racism result in a charge or a summons.
Gosh.
Jewish people in this country have lost faith, not in their religion, but in the government's ability to control this rampant form of racism that would probably not be for any other category. And we know there are systemic challenges that the government itself has in its own party, as do others. It's a challenge for British people as well, because we're all Brits. We're all in this together. And tolerating this or doing nothing about it, ignoring this fact, has led us to where we are. So the blame, I'm sorry to say, is historic, but it is ramped up. And the attacks against us are coordinated. This is not an accident. This is not just because of the war in Gaza. The rise in anti-Semitism has been going on for a very long time. And now we are where we are.
Right. Gents, it's good to talk to you this morning. I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for joining us.
I think that what this says more than anything else is that for those of us who aren't Jewish and maybe have no religion or maybe have another religion, that we need to actually call it out.
Yeah.
You've got to call it out. If you see it or if you're aware, you've got to call it out. It's totally unacceptable. It would be unacceptable for anybody of any religion or any to be picked on and traumatised in this sort of way.
And maybe check on your Jewish friends.
Yeah.
Now would be the time, wouldn't
It just
it? More
seems
than ever.
utterly mad in this day and age.
There's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. And with so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. But this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. ExpressVPN is offering up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free. That's top-level security from just £2.49 a month, and you're covered by their 30-day money-back guarantee. So just click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code now. Remember, when you're online, you are often sharing personal data, so hackers can steal your information, your passwords, your photos, and your bank details in just seconds. But ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. So why choose ExpressVPN? Well, it couldn't be easier to use. With just one click, you are protected. And ExpressVPN uses military-grade AES 256 encryption, which is the same standard trusted by the US government to guard their classified information. With their new tiered plans, you can protect up to 14 devices at once and manage passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 months extra for free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN.
Welcome back. We're going through the papers this morning with Charlie Rowley and Chloe Dobbs. Morning, you two. Charlie, let's have a look at the Times front page. And Tehran is linked to the arson attack that we saw yesterday on 4 volunteer ambulances.
Absolutely. And look, the moronic act of targeting ambulances is on its own a story worth sort of talking about. But the fact that it's targeted specifically to the Jewish community, where anti-Semitism that you were talking about earlier on throughout the programme is on the rise, we know that. But the fact further that now it is being investigated that these attacks could be linked to Iran, effectively, where we are...
Well, could be.
Could be.
We need to just be a little bit careful,
Absolutely.
don't we?
The investigation is ongoing and the Met haven't quite linked it there, and counter-terrorism police are looking into it. But if it is the case that comes about, it again, I think, will make people think why we should be doing, or why the Prime Minister at least should be doing more to support the cause to get rid of a tyrannical regime that funds international terrorism. That where we have the Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, all individual groups, splinter groups from and funded by Iran that want to do us harm. Where over the last year, 20 plots were foiled by MI5, now Secret Intelligence Services. These are sleeper cells. These are people that are in the country that want to harm our way of life. So we've got to do something about it. If it is the case that this is another example of those people, as I say, that just want to do us harm.
Yeah, I mean, Chloe, people will say, and look, it's not an invalid argument to say, well, we put ourselves at more risk by getting involved in things, which is why the Prime Minister says we've not been involved in offensive action. But so these plots against us were happening anyway.
Yeah, I think that people feel as though Keir Starmer has given a free pass to the IRGC. Well, not just Keir Starmer, but previous governments as well. We've previously had quite a soft stance to Iran because we wanted to keep trade open with them. But we've got all of these IRGC sleeper cells in the UK. As Charlie has pointed out, we've had 20 plots foiled by our security services. So I think regardless of whether this was actually linked to the IRGC or not, it's clear as day that this group needs to be a prescribed organisation. And I think the Jewish community are absolutely furious. I think things start to get quite heated in Golders Green yesterday, where people were coming out on the streets after that attack on those ambulances because they are just fed up of hearing from Keir Starmer and the rest of the cabinet, oh, we condemn this attack, but they're not doing anything to actually clamp down on anti-Semitism and the rising terror threat in this country.
Should we turn our attention to what on earth is going on in this country with anti-Semitism? We know it's been on the rise. There's been this real sense of it being on the rise. And then we've had this arson attack in Golders Green in London. We've had the Home Secretary saying anti-Semitism is increasing in this country. So what's going on? What do we expect anybody to do about it? How do we tackle it? What's causing it? I mean, there's so many questions here. But has the government got a grip of all of this?
Well, let's speak now to former Labour advisor Paul Richards. Very good morning to you, Paul. We heard from the Home Secretary yesterday saying this is the oldest hatred rising up again. Everyone's saying the right words. We're talking about additional funding and we're talking about high offences. But is enough being done to actually tackle the root problem here?
Well, good morning. I mean, firstly, just to condemn that awful attack on the ambulances. I don't know what kind of animal attacks an ambulance and thinks that's a legitimate process, but we'll hopefully see a police investigation that leads to arrests of the 3 hooded men that were seen running from the scene. You're right, of course, you have to have these protective measures like, shatterproof glass in schools and gates and fences around communal organisations, schools, synagogues, schools, colleges. But that's not the solution. The solution lies in tackling the underlying anti-Semitism of left and right in our politics, which sees this Jewish community in our country as a legitimate target. And by the way, I was looking at the numbers, reminding myself that there's only 290,000 Jewish people in the UK. It's a tiny population, 0.5% of the population, and yet getting this enormous increase in attacks, 3,700 attacks in the latest figures, according to the Community Security Trust. So it's a terrible situation and more must be done. I'm glad the government acted quickly yesterday, but I think we need more funding and we need more of a debate about what the root causes are.
Yeah, right, OK. But in a way, you're following the same path, Paul, aren't you? Because you're saying, you're glad the government's done something. We need to tackle the core problem. But how? And the idea that the government is tackling the core... I mean, you can say, well, it's successive governments, but this is the government we've got now. How are they tackling the core problem? When we're seeing things we're seeing all these things going on, but we've also seen within their tenure... Palestinian protests, which have been, in some cases, and some individuals on those protests, been absolutely openly anti-Semitic and no action taken.
Well, and on the other hand, you've seen Palestine Action activists being arrested en masse in Parliament Square for declaring support for a terrorist organisation. Today, for example, to give you another example, there will be an announcement, I believe, later about making it easier to sack anti-Semitic doctors and NHS staff from within the NHS. So Lord Mann has done a big inquiry into the NHS and anti-Semitism, and Wes Streeting is going to make it easier to get rid of those people, because we don't want anti-Semites working in the health service and discriminating against Jewish patients. So that's another step forward. But, it starts in the schools, it starts in the communities, talking about anti-Semitism. The government's funding more money for Holocaust education, so we can understand the nature of the Holocaust and the anti-Semitic lies that led up to that horror, and so that we can start this open conversation about what anti-Semitism is and isn't. And like I say, on the left as well as the right. I mean, my party, hangs its head in shame for those years when we were chock full of anti-Semites. Most of them have left or been kicked out. Many of them ended up in other parties on the left, the Green Party, for example, and they have